Okay, so it's been a while since I gave this, so unfortunately I have to look at the slides. I've got a few intro slides here to talk about a little bit of my background, how I got into this, and why I continue doing it. So I go by the nom de plume of Mononga Hela, and that is the name of the national forest where I actually had my first potential Sasquatch encounters. I had a long history as a caver, and my caving buddies and I used to go deep into the forest in the Mononga Hela National Forest in West Virginia. And on a couple of occasions there, on one occasion we got screamed at, which really stuck with me. I couldn't explain what it was. This was like 1994, but I always remembered it. And then on another occasion we found a deer carcass, a fresh kill, inside a cave in a place that would have been impossible for something like a coyote to drag it. Maybe a mountain lion could have gotten it there, but we didn't have lions apparently in West Virginia. And so that memory stuck with me too. And later I thought, well, this would be a really good stash place for Sasquatch, just inside a cave entrance. So let me make sure I can drive this thing correctly. There we go. Okay, so my background, I'm an Air Force trained cryptologic linguist. Starting in 1984, I began my training. I was 7 years active duty from the 80s into the 90s, doing audio collection and analysis in the Air Force. That career rotated me between Korea and NSA in Fort Meade, Maryland, where when you're in the field in Korea, you're doing the active collection, listening, you got the cans on your head, 9-10 hours a day, transcribing what you hear. And then when you're stateside at NSA, you're analyzing what others have transcribed, you bring it in, you study it, you do in-depth analysis, information analysis, and that's experience instead of skills would later, allow me to get into this line of analysis. I had no idea at the time that there would be a connection between what I was doing then and my current future. So let's see. I got started in this in 2008 when my first child was born. I sort of had to back out of caving because it was just a very rigorous, slightly dangerous hobby. And I needed something that would keep me around the house a little more, keep me entertained. I was becoming a family man, so I needed to be at home. And I was finding audio online, and especially through the BFRO website. And let's see if there's something on the next slide about that. Yeah, there you go. And I was listening to their audio recordings, and I realized as I was going through them, some things that they were attributing to Bigfoot, I knew were coyote, because I had listened to some coyote and stuff like that. I was like, eh. But then there were other things in there. I was like, wow, this is not, in my experience, a coyote. I'm not really sure what this is. And so I began digging through more and more audio out there, and some of it I could tell this is potentially a human faking it and things like that. And that's what brought me to the realization, hey, I could dust off those old Air Force skills and do a deep dive on this kind of research and try to develop, the knowledge base in that area. Everybody else was focused on photographs, videos, footprints, and that kind of research. And I was thinking, that's fine. I don't want to replicate what they're doing, but here's an avenue of research that's unique. Very few people are looking at it. I've got the right skills. And I would later meet other people like Scott Nelson who had the skills, and I dove in a whole hog. So that was my niche to contribute. I eventually met Scott Nelson. He's an outstandingly qualified cryptolinguist, 30-year career in the Navy. He learned 5 different languages while he was in the Navy. I only learned 1. I was a Korean cryptolinguist, and I kept a good deal of my Korean proficiency, and I use it around the house and, when I can, out on the town and stuff, with dry cleaners and things like that. There is a growing body of audio files out there, and it's much larger than it was when I initially put this briefing together several years ago. David Ellis, who is out on the West Coast in Washington State, was very instrumental. He had already, in 2008, collected a large body of audio. I connected with him. He shared his audio with me, and that gave me the first data set that I was able to deep dive on and begin to analyze. Charles has been a wonderful resource. He's always out there, always recording, very energetic and enthusiastic, especially on the technology front, as you all experienced last night. So he's given me great audio, and there's just too many people to name over that I've worked with over the years. What I have done though is I've collected all of this audio and saved it, and I save it by the person's name. And I went in a few months ago and counted in my collection. I've got over 250 people who have sent me audio over the years. Out of that, probably 75% have sent me something that I could deem credible. The other 25%, it was mistaken, that's an owl, a fox, a coyote, what have you. But to have those kinds of numbers was really outstanding. Now, I don't share all of that audio because there's a difference in there's a range of audio that we receive. There's the high-end, what I call consumer-grade audio, which I can share with anybody and they'll hear it clearly. And there's the really low-end stuff, which I have to use, my old Air Force skills to really dig deep into and hear it because it's so faint, it's just above the noise floor, very difficult to work with. I can't share that with a regular audience because they don't have the training or experience to pick that out, and they'll be like, oh, I don't hear nothing, it's all static or what have you. So let's see, so field recording for as often as we can do it. That's how we pursue this type of analysis, this type of research. After we get the recordings collected, and you heard Charles talk about long duration recorders last night, we leave those out there for 30 days or so. They'll collect audio for a month. We bring all of that home. We do post-analysis with software like Audacity, or other software that presents audio through a spectrogram, and you'll see some of those later tonight. That gives you a visual depiction of the audio. So you don't have to listen to it, you can actually look at it. Look at it long enough, and you start to recognize those signals that are not airplanes, not coyotes, not dogs, not gunshots. You begin to recognize the things that are not those, and you hone in on those, and those have the potential to be our target species. So working at the NSA as an analyst, what that gave me was the information analysis skills. And a part of information analysis when you're beginning in a new arena where there's no information is you have to have a seed of data to begin to instantiate your hypothesis. And the hypothesis is that we have this unknown species out there in the forests of North America. Like any other species, it needs to communicate, to procreate, protect itself, remain safe, hunt, gather resources. So working with that hypothesis, we should be able to collect their signals with standard, and these are intelligence techniques that we're using here, collecting what our quarry is saying out loud. And the seed data that I used were 2 recordings, the Sierra Sounds and the Ohio Howl. And you have to start somewhere. So I took those 2 as the best potential high quality data seeds that we could begin with. I had to work onto the assumption that those 2 are authentic recordings. They're not hoaxed, they're not faked. And I should be able to prove that they're authentic by over time tying them to more and more recordings. If those are real, there should be more recordings coming in over time that validate their accuracy and the truth of them. And fortunately, that has happened. A lot of small innovations along the way in the research. Spectrographic review and analysis is incredibly important to the ability to get through thousands of hours of audio. It's not just me, it's Charles, and there's a small army of audiophiles out there who are engaged in this type of research. Applied bioacoustic studies, that's the study of signals and vocalizations and sounds that animals make. That bioacoustic studies really sort of got rolling with the studies of whales and cetaceans. There were universities engaged in this off the coast of the west coast of South America. Back in the early 90s, they were doing this stuff, identifying individual whales by their vocalizations. Later, they transported that to the study of African elephants, and they were able to identify individual elephants communicating to each other over vast distances with infrasound. And so that those two initial studies gave legitimacy to the bioacoustic field of study. And so I've studied that, used that to sharpen my skills as well. Obviously, the long duration recorders, we started building those, I want to say around 2012 or so, or maybe a little earlier, because just running an overnight recorder was not getting us enough data. And so once we, it was Charles and I and Charlie Page up in Ohio, right? We all cooperated, and maybe a couple of others, and we came up with this long duration recorder platform. Went through a few different iterations, a few different models, and we've got something pretty solid now that'll give us, over a month of recording time. Okay. Conjecture. Most known species of animals are observed to communicate. I've said some of these things, safety and reproduction. Communication can be not just audible, but visual and chemical as well. Birds tend to use visual communication, the feathers and all that stuff. Chemical is more among the smaller animals, smaller species, snails and what have you, that tend to use chemical communication between them. Audible is obviously more common to larger and mammalian species or birds.
Yeah, we just had a wood knock.
Did you?
I just heard a wood knock in the woods.
Back there? Awesome.
Already.
All right, so they're in the neighborhood. That's good. And so there's the theory. If they exist, they need to communicate. We should be able to intercept their communication. Okay. Differentiating from other vocalizers. How do you know that it's not another known vocalizer? Through observation, comparative analysis. That's the information analysis end of this. Vast amounts of audio data exist for most of the common vocalizers. It's really easy to find recordings of all of these vocalizers up there. You got to study them. You got to learn them. You got to be able to recognize when you're listening to an elk, when you're listening to an owl. Oh, it's an owl? Which species of owl? So you've got to understand the vocals of individual species of owl. It takes time. You can do this over months and few years, but you begin to develop that ear. Rare examples that have occurred that took me a little while to figure out. Striped chipmunk, which makes a knock sound, not like a snap, but they make a knock. Chipmunks make a knock. It sounds very woody, and you have to be very cautious. You can hear this knock happening in the woods. It's actually a little territorial sound that chipmunks make. Pine martens make a squeal. Fortunately, we don't get a lot of pine marten audio, but they make a shrieking squeal kind of sound that is very difficult to isolate and associate with anything. Porcupines, you can find these on YouTube. Just Google porcupine sounds, and they make this cute little chittering, mumbling kind of thing that if you hear it and get it recorded, you're like, well, what the hell is that? What's mumbling in the forest? Is that a Bigfoot mumbling to itself?
How do you, like the knock of a chipmunk, how do you distinguish that from the knock? Is it a different frequency?
Nope. And that's the thing about percussions, because percussions...
It's just a straight line.
Yeah, they're what we call broadband, and they appear as a straight line in the spectrogram.
So you really can't distinguish.
You really can't. You can recognize them by their pattern. It's a matter of develop the ear. You listen to a lot of them, and you begin to hear, like I just heard somebody mimic, their knock, 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 knock repeatedly. And that's the way they make their vocal. Let's see. Knowledge of known species. We frequently debunk suspected Bigfoot calls collected by novices in the field. They hear the barred owl's famous whistle shriek. And they go, oh my God, that's a Bigfoot. No, it's not. They hear a red fox making its vixen shriek, which can be very unnerving. No, that's actually a fox. Coyote and coy wolf calls, or coy wolf hybrids, or there's a coy dog hybrids too, that make really weird, raspy, gravelly, deep kinds of howls that a lot of people mistaken for Bigfoot. And so we get a lot of that every year that comes in. But patterns have emerged. Again, going back to those seeds, we build off the Sierra Sounds and the Ohio Howl. We have new recordings that come in from years apart, miles apart, all across the continent. and they include some very common signals. The most common are the whoops, the wood knocks, the moan howls, and several new types of vocals have emerged over the years. And you're going to hear some of those vocals tonight. Depth and breadth, a wide variety of traits and calls have emerged. And what this breadth demonstrates is a complex variety of vocalizations or signal elements, elemental signals, that they combine into longer forms of communication on time. What those signals mean, who knows? It's conjecture at this point. Until we can actually interview the Sasquatch or get close enough to hear them regularly communicating and begin to determine what they're communicating about in any given situation, it's all conjecture on our part as to what they mean. You'll hear a lot of people anthropomorphize a moan howl. Oh, it sounds so sad and forlorn. No, who knows? Yeah, it sounds sad and forlorn to us, but in all the instances where we've heard it, it did not suggest a sad, forlorn Sasquatch. It suggests something very differently, and I'll touch on that topic later. Okay, so lots of signals coming in, and what we do as a cryptolinguist or as a linguist is we build a lexicon when we're studying a subject like this. This lexicon is probably 6 years out of date. There's a couple more things that could be added on here, but the things that we recognize and associate to a high degree with potential Sasquatch vocals are obviously the whoops, integrated wood knocks, not just wood knocks, but as Charlie has mentioned, the whoop and knock together. It's an integrated wood knock. So wood knocks integrated into the vocalization. That's a very important signal. Moan howls normally occur in threes. You'll hear the occasional single moan howl. I think I've heard a double moan howl once. I've heard of 4 moan howls in a row once since 2008. Almost always we get triple moan howls. 1, 2, 3 moan howls altogether. The Ohio howls, 3 moan howls. They're the classic example. Falsetto notes. You'll hear that when I play the Kentucky howls. There's falsetto in there. We get that a lot. That demonstrates vocal dexterity, lingual dexterity that they use a lot in their vocalizations. And it's almost as if they're on occasional, they're demonstrating or bragging about their lingual dexterity because they do things with their voices that are just bizarre. And you have to wonder, well, why even do that? Unless maybe they're showing off or something. And there I go, anthropomorphizing the Sasquatch. Broadband to narrowband transitions. You'll see some examples of this. This is where they go from a broadband roaring sound and they tighten it to a very narrow, controlled howl vocal. And you'll see these in the spectrogram. Extended sustain on their howls. Long, flat, no pitch changes, going on for 7, 8, 9, 11 seconds sometimes. That's very characteristic. There's only one other vocalizer in North America that howls like that, and that's wolves. Wolves don't do it consistently, and wolves only really exist at the very northern latitudes of the U.S. and obviously Canada and Alaska.
So do you do you take geography into consideration when you're analyzing this? If they're like, hey, this is from whatever, Georgia,
yep,
you can say it's not a wolf, right?
Yeah, definitely. We consider the location, the original location of the recording, what's present in the area, the vocalizers. That's like the pine marten I mentioned earlier, generally only at the northern latitudes. You don't hear those across the south. So they're a cold weather species. We do take all of that into consideration. Brassy timbre. We'll get a timbre in some of the vocalizations, and you'll hear some of that tonight, where the voice projects almost a mechanical tone, and it can sound like a brassy kind of trumpeting sound at times. Not sure how they generate it, but we get it enough that we've recognized it as part of that. Some of them do sound like horns, and we have a vocalization called a horn vocal that we hear. Sometimes it sounds like somebody just blew a trumpet out in the forest. Yodels, we get yodels every once in a while. I might have an example of that in here. Oo to ah phoneme transitions are actually very important. We get most of their howls are long, flat oos, but quite often they end with an ah. They'll go ooh, ah, right at the end. And I've got a lot of examples of that tonight. Roars, obviously a part of it. Shrieks, These will be falsetto shrieks, very high pitched. The Kentucky howls include some examples of that. A Yahoo or a Wahoo vocal. This is a really cool one that we don't get very often, but I've probably heard it a dozen times or more. Sometimes if you're in an area fortunate enough to have a group of Sasquatch, they'll all come online. One of them will vocalize in the night and the others will respond. And it's sort of like a ring in. Where's everybody at? And everybody, yo, I'm over here, yo, I'm over here, blah, blah, blah. And then towards the end, you'll hear one of them kind of respond with a Yahoo or a Wahoo. And it's up in pitch and down in pitch. And we get that often enough that it's another part of the lexicon. It's recognized. Mimicry. We do get instances of mimicry. I've been mimicked in the forest. I was with Charles in Pennsylvania, and we blasted in a quarter mile on this trail. We left Larry behind us at the trail head. He may have been more than a quarter mile. And we stopped. We're all out of breath. I did a whoop, and I do a terrible whoop. It's really ragged sounding. It sounds like crap. Very unique. And I let out a whoop like this, and we listened. 30 seconds go by, nothing. It's just really silent. And then after 30 seconds, almost identical to my voice, the execution was perfect, comes back to us from the forest. Whoop! And we're thinking, well, shit, that was Larry back at the trailhead, and he answered us. But we couldn't get him on the radio because the topography. And so we just, okay, let's blast out of here. We blasted back out to the trailhead and asked Larry, hey, did you return our whoop? Yeah, you heard us? Like, no, I didn't make any whoops. And it was something mimicking me. There are other researchers who have done the same thing. They'd go out and make a vocalization and they'd hear a perfect mimic of their own voice coming back at them. Okay, I promise I've only got 10 total slides here, and I think we're through almost all of them. So these are some of the consumer grade examples that I'll play for you tonight. The Ohio howl, the triple moan howl from Morton, Washington, an Iowa howl. This is a single moan howl from Iowa. Mississippi long. You'll notice some of these are fairly old. Mississippi long is a good example of long flat pitches and some pitch breaks. The Kentucky vocalizations from 2010 here in Kentucky. Bruno howls from West Virginia. Michigan vocals, and then Michigan vocals from a BFRO report. And I've got a few other things to throw in there as well. And let's see. I do have a YouTube channel, Sasquatch Bioacoustic. I have not put out any analysis videos in a while. It takes a lot to put them together. And I don't get a lot of consumer grade audio in the last few years. I get a lot of really poor audio, but I can't pump those up enough to make a video out of them. So I haven't put out anything in a while, although I do want to. I have a blog out there on blogspot.com where we talk about videos. We analyze some of the videos. We have some tutorials on how to use Audacity. So if you're into this stuff, go check that out. I still had a SoundCloud account. It's got collections of the non-consumer grade type stuff. So if there's something cool, but it sounds like crap, but it's still cool and I want to share it, I'll throw it out on SoundCloud. And I don't know, there's dozens and dozens of clips out there. If you want to send me something to review, there's the email to send it to. I prefer an MP3 format, please, because the file size is much smaller while the quality is retained. WAV format is just consumes the hell out of space. And you can email it to me, but I'll have to delete it eventually because I can't download it and keep it on my hard drive. It's too large of a file format.
Is your email spelled incorrectly on purpose?
No, that's actually correctly spelled. I did spell it that way. That's the way West Virginians, locals around the Mononga Hela forest pronounce Monongahela. They don't call it the Mononga Hela, it's the Monongahela forest. So that's the way I do it.
Doesn't have many teeth, that's why.
Yeah, something like that. I don't know. Yeah,
Greg bite you.
yeah, Greg resembles that remark. Okay, let's
Actually, you
see.
mentioned the audio clip from Morton, Washington. I just spent 11 days on an expedition out there, right near Morton, with the group.
Yeah, Morton, Washington. I'd love to visit that place because there's just some amazing stuff has come out of there over the years. Sightings and Class A's and great recording. Okay. Let's go through this. So what a lot of these are spectrograms and are recorded videos of the spectrograms as they play. Some of them are videos that I actually posted on my YouTube site. And I need to ask, is there a bottle of water in the area? Because I think I'm going to lose my voice.
Somebody have water?
How about Gatorade?
Well, yeah, if there's a fresh bottle, that will be fine.
This is the first
Thank you.
bottle of
Somebody
Gatorade.
can jump
Oh,
back
that'll
in
be
the
fine.
guy.
Okay. Thank you. Much appreciated. I know I'll lose my voice here in a while. Okay, so let's start with one of the seed audios, the Ohio Howl. Most of you have heard this. This is one of my YouTube videos. Let's work on the volume here. Actually, the audio is coming out of the projector right now. Don't worry, we'll get this right.
While he's doing that, the Kentucky Vocalizations came right across the interstate from here. If you go across 65 in Barron County, that's where those Kentucky Vocalizations came from. Lauren Coleman, and Lauren Coleman's book, Mysterious America, he writes about Monkey Cave Hollow in the 1700s, where they killed a tribe of monkey men. That's right where the Kentucky Vocalizations came from, where Lauren Coleman wrote that in his book.
Okay, let's back this up. I'm gonna have to put my eyeballs on. There you. This is the way I make my videos. Normally I present the original audio, so people in sound hear that. You hear all that noise, static. So there's 3 of these. And after the original, what I'll do is I'll do a filtered, amplified version, clean up some of the noise, make it as presentable as possible, as consumer grade as possible. Now that little ooh, those are responders. Okay, so that was original seed audio, 3 moan howls, and since then we've recorded many more instances of triple moan howls. I gotta get some light on this subject somehow. Is there a keyboard light?
There is.
Yeah, that ought to work. Thank you. Okay. So here's a triple moan howl. I believe this is out of Morton, Washington. Yeah. August 20th, 2010. So the Ohio howls were 1994. Matt Moneymaker recorded them. Again, original audio. Try to get out of here. Get the filtered audio right after this. And you can't see it in here, but there's 2 whoops right at the end. Right there and right there. Now after the filtering, these become a lot more obvious. This begins with an initial vocalization before the first moan howl. Right there. Okay. So what we believe is happening there is there's an initial vocalizer sets up the alarm. And the situation where this happened is Kirk and his crew had just driven into this campsite. Kirk had the foresight to turn his recorder on as he was stopping his vehicle, set it up on top of the roof, and turn his vehicle off and all of that. And these vocals began immediately after they all stopped their engines. So the initial vocal happens, maybe it's a warning. The 3 moan howls happen. We see moan howls in situations where it seems like there's a reach out, one of these group call-ins. Hey, where is everybody? Potentially, hey, it's time to get up and move out. And that could have been the situation here, where humans had just entered the area, time to call in, and let's get together and move on. And then you see the 2 whoop responses at the end. Those are responders to whoever's doing the moan howl. Maybe the moan howl is the clan leader. Who knows? And that's my theory, is that it would be the clan leader. But the whoops are answering back saying, yo, we're here. Yo, we're here. Okay. And then they go off on their merry way and do whatever. But they usually clam up right after that. As Charlie was saying earlier, they don't talk a lot. They get off the stage quickly. When they do speak, they make their vocals, they make their knocks, and then they shut up, which is in keeping with their nature. They're cryptic. They are trying to keep a low profile. So if you don't want to be noticed, why would you be out there running your mouth in the forest, making it easy for somebody to find you? Okay. There we go. Okay, this is a single moan howl. You hear some voices in the foreground. Those are squatches sitting around a campfire. They didn't even hear this when it happened. They picked it up later as they were listening to the audio and they sent it to me. This might get loud. Example of a single moan howl.
So why do you think it was only a single and not a triple?
Not sure why. I mean, the vast majority are triples, but every once in a while we'll just get a single, and even more rarely a double. But maybe, again, trying to be cryptic. Okay, Mississippi long. This is a different kind of howl. This is long and flat. This will show you the sustain that we're talking about. Flat pitch, long sustain. No, I'm sorry. I'm mistaken. My mistake. I was thinking of something called the new howl, which has long, flat sustain. That's one of the few examples of a vocalizer that's doing multiple moan howls over and over. And I think there's like 6 or 7 Very rare vocal. I've probably captured that fewer than a dozen times over the years. The falsetto shrieks, you hear that really high pitch, yeah. That's a responder responding to whoever's doing the moan howl. Not sure why they do it, but it occurs. It reoccurs fairly frequently. I've got at least one more example of it in here. And it is a falsetto. The nice thing about spectrograms is you can analyze the frequencies that these vocals are occurring in. And anyone who's into music or singing understands the various vocal ranges that exist. Falsetto is the highest human vocal range that singers use. Just above falsetto, you actually get into a range that's called the whistle register. And that's where the lowest bird calls begin, or whistles actually occur. Human voice doesn't really get up into the whistle register. But falsetto is the very highest pitched singers. And some of those were actually in the falsetto range. And people without vocal training generally can't get to that pitch.
So what you're saying is a Bigfoot would be a good vocal coach?
Potentially, yeah.
Good career there.
Yeah.
I think Mariah Carey can.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, here's the new howl. So this is the example of the longer, flatter pitch. Voice breaks into these high pitches, almost falsetto register, but they have this brassy metallic tone to them, like a horn. So he ended that howl with a whoop, just a very deep one. Listen for these brassy high pitch. That's a voice making that. It's not a horn. It's not an instrument.
It's not two vocalizers?
Nope.
That's one.
It's a single vocalizer doing all of that.
What state was that?
Like almost stereo.
Yeah.
Say that was Mississippi.
That's wild.
Yeah.
How do you know it's one vocalizer?
Just by the continuity of it. And that's not the only example of it. We have many more examples where they can do that. What's being demonstrated there, and I didn't talk about this earlier, they can execute these pitch breaks that allow them to jump from one frequency to a higher frequency. When a human tries to do this, and it's pretty difficult. I've tried this, and I don't have vocal training. Humans changing pitch often execute through the pitch, and in singing, it's called a glissando, where you slide from a lower pitch to a higher pitch. Actually breaking from one pitch where you stop this pitch and immediately jump to a higher pitch is pretty difficult. It takes training to do that. They do this regularly and very easily. And so pitch breaks are another part of the lexicon that I didn't really mention earlier. And that vocalizer, there were no secondary responders in that recording that I could pick up. It's just this one vocalizer throughout, and he executes a few pitch breaks. And we do have other examples of similar, pitch breaks and falsetto shrieks and brassy tones. And all of this really does depend upon corroboration. If you have just one example of it, that's not enough. You need multiple examples of something before you can give it a high probability of authenticity. And on that note, let me mention, how do I determine something during analysis, what its probability of authenticity is? I've developed a test that I apply for myself. Given that we have a lexicon, this is the Kentucky vocals. We'll listen to this. Those are people, researchers talking. He even says it.
You do an amazing job taking the humans out of that.
Yeah, it took some good software to do that. These were hard to hear. Initial whoop with these little whoop sounds. That was something calling out, hey, I'm out here alone. Maybe that's what it was saying. And then this big loud responder answers. Pitch break. Falsetto sleep. That was one vocalizer did. So you can see from the continuity of that voice, while it's moaning here, whoa, the continuity of that vocal, and they do those pitch breaks in there. There's a lot to unpack in that. There were other vocals. You might have heard the woot, woot, woot. At one point, that seems to have been a different responder that made 3 deep woots. There's the initial responder, or the initial vocalizer that made the whoop, doo, doo, doo. Not sure what that was. Let's guess. Maybe it's a scared youngster out there in the woods saying, hey, I'm out here alone, I'm scared. And then the big one answers with a big, long, powerful howl. The situation around this was collected by a paranormal group who had gone out deep into the forest to an abandoned home. They had taken their recorder into the kitchen and left it on the counter. All the windows in the house were busted out, so the recorder was able to hear what's going on outside of the house. The investigators walked out on the front porch, and that's when these vocalizations occurred. So they were loud enough that the recorder sitting in the kitchen could easily record and capture these vocalizations. And the guy standing there listening, while they were looking for ghosts, they caught Bigfoot. And one of them, you can hear in the recording, actually said, that's a Bigfoot. You know, he knew what he was hearing, or what he was listening to. There are other things in there. Yeah, I won't bother picking them out. I will mention there's an example of integrated wood knocks. I think it's the second big howl in there. If you listen closely, and you can kind of see it on the spectrogram, either the howler itself, or another, potential Sasquatch makes 3 loud knocks right in the middle of the howl. So it's like, nah, or howl, bang, 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 and the howl continues on and ends.
Do you
So-
think they do that with a regular stick, or are they doing that vocally?
I am going to assume that they're using something to bang on something else, because, making a vocal like that and pounding on your chest sounds pretty implausible. Obviously, if your mouth is busy making a howl, you're not going to be doing mouth pops or anything like that. So I have to presume that they're using something to bang on something else. But that's an example of it. Let's see. Let's move on.
I hear a howl or a growl or something.
I'll try to get through these. West Virginia, 2013. This is some crazy stuff right here. Bruno House, Bruno, West Virginia. This lady collected over 2 days, this vocalizer. The rain really makes the audio hard to hear. So she would start her phone recording or videoing after she heard the first howl. That's why all the initial howls are cut off. that's a roar, an example of a roar. And you see, this is the second day where it's not raining, atmosphere is dry, sound carries a lot better. Listen here, right at the end. That's another vocalizer responding. We call that a cry vocal. It took a while to recognize that as being a unique and different vocalizer. We've got other examples of that.
It's also a roar into a fine frequency too.
Yes, and so when I first made that video, I was calling these roars because that's obviously what they sound like. It was a little later that I realized, okay, what this is, it's a recurring pattern. It's a broadband vocalization, the roar part, transitioning into a narrow band where they tightened it up into the howl. And so that became part of the lexicon. I just never updated the video to change that labeling. This is one of the later videos I did in 2013 where I was experimenting with trying to label the spectrogram. Michigan vocals. Broadband vocals. That's a little bit of yoga at the end. Okay, so I'll talk about this. Michigan Recording Project started collecting these in 2007. They were researching on a farm they had access to. There's a river at the edge of the farm, thick cedar thicket along the bottom, river bottom. And this thing would come in and approach their camp in the evening and just yell and scream at them. It remained hidden, but they got great recordings, not just that one year, but they recorded every year for 3 or 4 years. And they continued to go back and record up through at least 2018, I think was the last time that they sent me any audio. They took a lot of crap when they shared this audio. They publicly, a lot of people in the community jumped on them and said, "Well, that's too good, and you guys are faking it. You put a microphone up in somebody's face, blah blah blah." And the people sued them down had no credibility, no background, no ability to analyze and understand what was there. And I took my time. It took a number of years studying other audio, studying this audio, and I finally came to the conclusion, along with all of the other audio that they collected over the years, that yeah, that's authentic. And what they have there is an individual that is really pretty aggressive. He's not had any physical contact with the researchers yet, but he has shown himself to them on a couple of Class A's. He has trashed one of their recorders that they strapped to a tree in about 2015. And we nicknamed him Grumpy because he's just pissy, man, all the time. When they come to the farm and they're there recording and just camping by the river, this guy comes in and yells and screams at him. Now, after 2018, the area got logged and all the activity just dropped off. They did pick up a little hint that they're still in the area, but they've moved a few miles off into some thicker forest where they have better cover, so they don't visit the farm as much. But yeah, they have a website. It's called Moonfruit Vocals is the URL, and they're the Michigan Recording Project. If you Google that, you should be able to come up with it. And it's a Flash-based website, and you can go through a couple of years worth of their audio. There's a lot of great clips out there. It's really unique stuff. Let's see. Yeah, don't listen to people when they say something's real or authentic. Ask them if they shoot it down, why? Why is it not authentic? And if they say it's real, why? Why is it authentic? You know, what's your basis for that? challenge what people are saying out there, because they were trashed in public. They shut up. They stopped sharing their data. And man, let me tell you, they've got years of great recordings that the public will never see. Isabella County. This is a good one. This is a BFRO report. Jim Sherman did this. There's a variety of crazy vocals. Long flat pitch with sustain. And these are clips all put together. Sounds pretty human-like, doesn't it? Colliding with the coyote. He wanted to be heard. Broad band to narrow band vocal. And again. Yeah, heard something.
Yeah.
This is human. They're blowing out their pipes. Mimicry. Yep. That, good question. Yellow-billed cuckoo. You hear them hot summer nights at night. They're up in the trees. They're migratory. They come up to North America in the summer, and they make that clicking sound at night.
The longer howls there.
Yeah.
We captured something like that in the Hup Tulips Range in the Southern Olympic Peninsula last year.
Nice. Yeah. There's some.
Like that.
There's some really amazing long howls. I think a fellow named Johnson years ago, back in the 90s, using the cassette recorder, got some really great ones.
Chris Spencer, Olympic Project,
Uh-huh.
one almost identical to it, 120 miles from there in Morton.
Yeah. Chris sent me his stuff, and I recall
That's
that.
cool. That's
Now, that's just one vocalizer who was unusually crazy one night, and we clipped a bunch of his stuff together. But that location, Isabella County, Jim Sherman recorded there for almost 2 years, and it went into a BFRO report that I worked with him on. If you want to read this, and I recommend go take a look at this report. It's just astounding. I can't remember the number of it, but go to the BFRO website or even Google BFRO report, Isabella County.
You can find the Isabella County Hall with the singing vocals that
Yeah,
you recorded on YouTube. And I actually used it one night at midnight out on the power line, and I got a call response.
Wow, that's
and
great.
I actually was using that thing that you have up there, that Bluetooth.
Uh-huh.
I got one from Walmart. I
Yeah.
don't know, a party box or something it's called. Me and another person took it out on the power line behind my parents' house at midnight, and we got a call response.
That's
After
fantastic.
Jim Sherman's recording.
Yeah, and that's his video too. He put a few out. The singing howls, when he and I first listened to it, I commented, wow, that's just beautiful, because and this is an example of what I believe occasionally they're actually kind of showing off their voice. And these howls are just so beautifully executed. It's almost like they're singing, not like human-like singing, but they're howling in a way that just shows it's beautiful, it's languid, it's perfectly controlled. And it's just 3 rising pitch howls that are just lovely to listen to. And so Jim did a video of them. I don't think I have them here.
The one that I used, it almost sounds like whales.
Yeah,
That's
it's
the closest thing I can compare it to.
it's
the whale.
it sounds that nice. Yeah, it's like I won't insult it by trying to make it, but it is beautiful.
Is that cottage in the same county or Midland?
That was behind my house.
No, I mean compared to Isabella. How far up?
I'm in Midland County, which
Right,
is
so
next
these
to
two
Isabella
counties,
County.
These 2 counties are very close.
Yeah,
Probably
my
Okay.
county
less
is
than
next
50
to
miles
Isabella.
from each other.
Okay, yeah, this is
Yeah.
along the northern county line in Isabella County, and Jim captured audio there on that farm, working with the renters who were on that farm for almost 2 years. So there's many more nights, and we cataloged all of it in that BFRO report. So there's literally dozens and dozens of clips attached to that report that I isolated. He wrote the report. I made all the attachments. Really recommend everybody go out there and look at. I think it's number 32918. I used to have it memorized, but it's an easy Google. Isabella County. Okay, this clip is the one that we use very successfully to sound blast, call blast. It comes out of St. Louis County, Minnesota. It says probably the closest we've ever gotten a recorder to a potential Sasquatch, and I use that word potential. Until I see him doing this, I can't say it's definitely a Sasquatch. But these guys were close, and it's not just one, not just 2. There are 4 potential Sasquatch vocalizing throughout this clip. It's a long clip. I won't play the whole thing. I'll just go right to the best part of it, and maybe we'll get some kind of response. The original clip was 23 minutes long. And what happens is these 4 Sasquatch are traveling. They come in from the left side of the stereo field at distance. They're a long ways off. They're moving pretty fast. And they move through the stereo field. 2 of them are in the foreground, and they come within a couple of 100 yards of the recording, and we get the loudest vocals from them at that point. 2 others are in the distance, maybe up to a quarter mile away, and they're responding. They're just talking back and forth to each other, doing these crazy howls. The howls sound a good deal like wolf howls, and there are wolves in that area. Are they mimicking the wolves, to try to keep their a low profile? Yeah, that's a theory. But you'll notice in these long, flat, wolf-like howls that sound like ooh, almost always end with ooh, ah. Wolves do not do ah at the end of their howls. So you'll see that through here. I'm going to have to jump ahead in this video a little bit. I mean, even though I've shortened this video down. Oops. Yeah, that's it. It's a 9-minute video. I'm not going to make you sit through that. The original was 23. And we cut out a lot of dead space. So you see, this is at distance. You first hear them, they're off in the distance, and you start to get these moans. Yeah, there you go. They're coming closer. You hear that ah at the end? It becomes more pronounced. Sustain, power. Now at this point, it's hard to tell that's not a wolf because you don't have anything. You've got a lot of power, but it sounds very wolf-like. Real quickly, let me try to play this again. This is what we call a down whoop. It's the opposite of a whoop. You hear that descending vocal? That's what started to clue me in that these may not be wolves. Okay, here's where it gets good. Two vocalizers together. That's a train. Train. This is the actual cadence. I don't know if that's a wolf or a coyote. Okay, now it's getting clear. Brassy tone, you hear that brassy? Don't want to step on that. This is the best part. More of a moan howl. Okay. We'll stop right there. And after that point, they start disappearing into the distance. And I mean, there's moan howls towards the end. There's a few subtle whoops in there and the occasional knock. But that very last one, that up and down pitch, incredibly unique. We've only got one example of that. And if it wasn't in association with all of these other better known signals from the lexicon, I couldn't really tell you what that is. But you grow the lexicon through association. That's what information analysis is. You collect data points, and as these data points prove themselves out with multiple data points over time, you're adding new signals to and connecting them through recordings where they all appear together, and you begin to collect data points on those. So that, whatever the heck that is, lingual dexterity, obviously. They're demonstrating, yeah, I can do this. You know, I'm showing off. Never heard any other vocalizer do that, you know, not a wolf, a coyote, or anything. Sounds sort of ape-like, but, you know, I hate saying it sounds like. It is what it is. We've only got one example of that, but it's in association with all of these better known, you know, brassy tone, flat pitch, good power, oo to ah phoneme transition, a couple of whoops in there, down whoop. There's some subtle knocks in there, moan howl. You know, all of those things point to these are four Sasquatch moving along together.
How about how it appears to be mirrored images, like is that harmonics from the same range? Of
Yeah,
different
these are,
frequencies?
so good question. These are harmonics, and this is the way the spectrogram demonstrates. What's happening is, and I should have explained this earlier, the strongest resonant frequency, where the most power is always at the bottom, or almost always at the bottom, and that's why you see the brightest colors down there. That's the true pitch that they're vocalizing at, and they call that the F0. But what you get in sound theory is that vibrating frequency also causes vibrations at frequencies that are even multiples above it. So like if this is 350, well at 200 or 2 times 350, which is 700, you'll get what's called sympathetic vibration. Some energy will vibrate the frequency at that range, 700. And again, 3 times 350, which would be what, 1050, you'll get more sympathetic vibration, but it's going to be weaker. So you'll get these sympathetic vibrations at higher pitches, and that's what a harmonic is. It's a sympathetic vibration. And as these harmonics increase in pitch, they get farther away from the fundamental, they fade out, they grow weaker. And that's what all of these upper level energy signatures are that you're seeing are the fundamentals.
Do you have control sounds for comparison, like a coyote or?
Oh
or
yeah,
something?
oh yeah, yeah. I've got.
Also trying to recreate what you have. for
I'm sorry.
comparison?
The
Like a human trying to recreate that sound for comparison.
Yeah, we have tried recreation, and it's. I mean, I won't say it's impossible, but recreating to this level of accuracy and detail, we've not been able to do it. So we kind of gave up on it. It would take a lot of training to be able to mimic these things this well, to this level of authenticity. And I will say some people have tried hoaxing it and tried to pull the wool over our eyes. But yes, we do have a huge collection of control sounds. We work with libraries like the Macaulay Library of Ornithology. They have a massive library of online bird vocalizations that we listen to and study. Then there's collections I've built over the years that I use for comparison. So like all of the known vocalizers, I've got good collections of those. And then when I'm researching a sound that I've not heard before, one of my go-to places is going to be Google and YouTube. People are always posting really good videos of vocalizers out there, and they quite often get the vocalizer live. So yeah, that's a great question. And of course, naturally, we have to try to authenticate this or differentiate this from all of the known vocalizers that are out there. And that's how we're able to isolate these as, okay, this is potentially more likely a Sasquatch because of its resemblance to the lexicon of potential Sasquatch signals versus a gray wolf pack moving by. Because when this came out, I was studying gray wolves up in timber wolves, up, down, left, and right. And there are some similarities, you know, the flat pitch, the ooh part of it. But canids have a very distinct set of signals that they use. Canid quality, very nasally pitch, whining, barks are often a part of their lexicon that you don't see in this. And it's those things that help you differentiate between the two types of vocalizers.
Do
And
wolves
secondary
make a lot
markers.
of vocalizations as they're moving, or are they static when they move them?
Both. I mean, here, if we were to spend time really digging into this, you can tell they're moving constantly, and you're getting occasional wood knocks, you're getting occasional whoops. So you're getting these secondary vocalizations as they move. And Charles made a good point. It's not the primary vocals that really prove these things. It's the secondary vocals, the weaker signals, the responders that help authenticate, especially when you're trying to differentiate something as a hoax. Hoaxers generally don't understand the concept of communication, one, and that a communicator is sending a message out, and normally they're going to get some form of a response, an authentic response. And it's those secondary signals, the responder, that helps us authenticate that, okay, this is potentially a valid Sasquatch vocalization because we have the secondary responder to it. I started to mention earlier, and let me finish that thought. So the rules that I apply for myself to help substantiate the validity of a signal is I need to hear at least 3 well-known artifacts of the lexicon in the recording before I can give it a high probability or a strong possibility of being a potential Sasquatch vocalization. If I only get 1, I'm like, okay, maybe, but you know, it's just notable for the record. If I get 2, maybe, it's a possibility, but I can't give it, a strong, credible, credible amount of support. When I can get 3, it's almost unheard of for a hoaxer to understand enough of the lexicon to be able to hoax 3 elements of the lexicon adequately to the point where they can fool me, in a trained ear with their hoax. And so once we get to 3 elements out of the lexicon, then I can say, okay, there's a very good chance that this is high probability. And that rule is proven very useful over the years. It just makes it a lot easier for me to rule out things as, it's a maybe, but let's just not waste a lot of time digging into something that's a maybe when there's so much good audio out there that is high probability, and that's where we focus our attention.
Devin, do you ever
so
get
what's more impressive to you, like the low sounds on that graph or like the high sounds?
It's all impressive to me, the full range, because what it shows is they have an extremely dynamic range from the very low, controlled, powerful pitches.
Like looking at the graph, like the low, are you like, that is super cool, or are you looking up the higher that it resonates up?
It's not so much what I'm seeing depicted here is cool. It's the changes. It's the execution of how they control their voice. And like the Kentucky vocalizations just blow my mind, because when I dig into it, there's so much going on there, and the way they change, it's really the changes that and the features, the tones, the pitches that really get me excited.
Yeah.
Because there's other vocalizers out there that don't do stuff like this.
Well,
This is
mine is
completely
blank when you have the colors and then it goes, choo, but when those are straight, like, what is amazing about that? Like, what?
okay. In that instance, good question. It's the control that it takes to hold a pitch that flat for that long.
Okay.
You got to have immensely powerful lungs and good vocal control to do something like that. And you'll also notice in some of these, there's this brassy tone, that brassy pitch. A human might be able to train and replicate something like that, but we get this so often from all across North America that I know there's not that many trained voices out there in the middle of the forest at night faking this stuff just to fool me.
I'm with
Okay.
you.
Yeah. So that's what gets me excited about it. It's the sheer dynamics of it.
Examples of infrasound with associated Bigfoot, reported Bigfoot.
I've got just one example, and I don't have it with me. Ron Bowles.
Under 20 hertz.
Yeah, it was under 20 hertz. The mic couldn't pick it up, but the actual vocal itself had just enough energy that crept above 20 hertz that the mic picked that spike up. And Ron was wearing his recorder when it happened. He believes he was zapped or something like a zap.
But on the spectrogram, you saw the under 20 hertz.
Yep, you can see the energy, right? It was like from 20 to 30 hertz. An energy spike crept in there. And then seconds later, he went to his knees. And you can hear him.
That one you just played, is that on your SoundCloud? Is that available to listen to the whole 3 minutes? Or?
It's on my YouTube. Definitely on my YouTube. Yeah, you can hear the whole thing there. What is going on here? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm used to my laptop.
Go down to VLC, right?
VLC. Yeah, I'm a Linux boy, so What is this? Lone howler. Yeah. Hard to hear. filter down. That really low flat howl. This is something I recorded not too far from Charlottesville, Virginia, between Charlottesville and the Blue Ridge Parkway. It's horse country out there. A lot of big expensive houses and property. There's a river that runs through there, and I've had great Sasquatch activity in that area, and I recorded that one night. That's a good example of. I believe that to be a high probability Sasquatch vocal, not just on its own, but because of the couple of years of audio that I recorded in that area. But that's a good example of something that I can study with my ear, but I can't really share it with the public because it's not consumer grade. You know, most people are like, oh, it sounds like a hound dog to me, but they won't recognize the unique characteristics of it. And it's just not a great quality recording. I've got gobs and gobs of that kind of stuff. That's the vast majority of what the research material is.
Devin, what about picking up on your recorders other researchers? You ever have that happen?
I'm sorry.
Picking up other researchers
On the-
driving up by your location and hearing
Yeah,
them
that-
talking and doing yells and wood knocks. You can actually hear
Yeah.
everything they're doing.
Well, that happens most often in this kind of a situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we're out on investigation. This is probably one of the worst places for me to do audio research
Yeah.
because we're all out there whooping and
Yep.
hooting and
Like
hollering.
Salt Fork.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. But quite often I can almost tell, okay, that's human because
Yep.
we tend to vocalize a certain way. And let's see, what's this? Yeah. That's the barred owl and a coyote. I don't know why I included that. It just happened to be in this folder. That shriek in the beginning is a classic barred owl whistle shriek. I get that sent to me so many times every year. Oh, listen to this Bigfoot. No, that's that. So when you hear that whistle shriek, and let me play it one more time for you.
Like on your graph, like so it would show up different in Audacity, like.
Yeah. Let's see if we can open with Audacity here. And no, it doesn't come up.
You can open Audacity and find the file.
Okay.
I think pretty sure I have Audacity.
Yeah, it's okay. It's not really worth doing, but I'll play it one more time. Whistle shriek in the beginning. Okay. Who cooks for you call? I recorded that in West Virginia. It was just cool that the owl managed to kick off a coyote response. Okay. This is a good example. I threw this in here. This is what research audio really looks like. That came from the area between Charlottesville and Blue Ridge Parkway, part of my 2-year study in that area. That high-pitched stuff, summertime cicadas, and they're just impossible to get around. But that showed in 3 phases. That's the same recording moving through my filtering process, where we managed to knock out the high-end cicadas, knock them back. We knock down the low-end rumble, and that helps bring out, and it leaves the signal in the background. That was a good example of integrated wood knocks integrated into this vocal, which is, in that case, was a roar vocal. So something is knock, knock, rah, like that. That was a great research area. I need to go back and visit again. It's a 100-mile drive from my home. But I think the landowners around there kept noticing that, hey, who's this guy who shows up here once a month and walks into the woods for a half hour and comes back out? So, yeah.
Close to my house, actually.
Yeah, in fact, you were going to take over that area for a while. But, yeah. Listen to this. Weird mumbling sound. So that's another example of the filter run that I go through. And it's always important to preserve your original data. Never lose your original data because you need to go back and reanalyze it over time. There are a lot of just really bizarre, weird sounds that come out of the forest. I couldn't tell you what that is, but I can tell you that was captured in association with all of these other high probability Sasquatch vocals. So it happened about the same time, same evening. It caught my ear. I was like, okay, that's cool. Let's hold on to it. You grab those things and you put them into the memory banks and you keep a hold of them because you may hear them again years later. That's how I began to recognize the Yahoo vocal. You know, I heard a Yahoo once, and then a few years later, holy crap, there's another Yahoo. And then over the years, you begin to assemble more data points. Maybe I'll hear that weird mumble again someday. What's this? Yeah. I got no idea what that was, but I was recording on the south side of, it's an army fort, the place where they captured John Wilkes Booth, not far north of Richmond. Fort Hood, yeah. They've got massive ranges out there. And let me tell you, military ranges are a great area for doing Sasquatch audio research. They tend to populate those big, vast tracts of forest. I've got some great reports and stories from those areas. And I was just recording, didn't have a lot of action, but this came out of the woods one night while I was recording down there. Couldn't tell you what it was, but it's another great example of the weird kind of sounds that you pick up from time to time. Okay, I think there are the last couple here. Whoop response. This is me. Okay, so that was very early in my research career. I want to say 2010 or 2012, somewhere in that range. And I have this great research area on the border of Virginia and West Virginia, really remote. I've taken Greg out there. I think I've taken you there, Charles. No? Okay. I've taken Russ Jones. I'll take you out there. There's a natural trap there between two mountains. Very deep valley on one side, pleasant, grassy, open area at the top. For deer to get from this deep valley, the easiest way is to go through this saddle between these two massive mountains, and they come up through this saddle and then they get into this beautiful area for forage and all that stuff. I've been recording in there for years, and I've taken Greg there. We've seen eye glow on the hill above us. This was very early on in my investigation of that area. I hiked in there at night or at sundown. I put up a parabolic dish, and I walked out in front of the dish, maybe 50 or 100 yards, something like that. And I had learned do a whoop and a knock because I kept hearing that in all the recordings. And I would do a whoop and a knock, and I'd listen for 3 minutes. Nothing happened. I did a whoop and a knock. I listened for 3 more minutes. Nothing happened. I did this, and this is the third whoop and knock. Whoop, knock. And you hear it after a few seconds. This voice comes back, and I didn't hear the voice at the time, but I did hear the knock. And the voice just sounds kind of angry in the recording. It's like it's annoyed almost. But the knock immediately after that, knock, I heard that, and it was 200 yards up the hill above me, overlooking this saddle that all the deer pass through. And it's thick, nasty, heavy wooded area up there. I've never ventured up into it. I want to go up in there someday. And I was alone. I was 3 miles off the highway. Sun was going down, and I heard that knocking. Yeah, it just scared the pants off me. I was like, okay, they're here and I'm out of here. So, but that was very memorable. And that's what taught me that, yeah, I can get responses. The whoop and the knock is the most successful technique I've ever used for getting a response. It seems to be their go-to vocalization for announcing themselves and asking, hey, is there anybody out there? Whoop, knock, like that. And I believe if you try that, you'll have the best results. I tend to get a response maybe 10% of the time. So, 10 attempts, I'll get one response out of that.
What's the most knocks you've recorded in a row?
The most knocks?
Like, yeah. Or recordings that have sent in like consecutive knocks.
Oh, wow. I don't know. I don't think I've ever counted. Yeah, probably triples and things like that. It's not massive. Lots and lots of knocks. I can't put my finger on any. I've got a pretty good audio memory. I mean, they're there. There's triples, maybe a few more, but I think, hold on. One of my very first knock recordings had 5 knocks in it. And that's when I was researching alone for the very first time. And I was making wood knocks, no whoops, just wood knocks as the sun went down.
I know with the Browns one time, Jack did a double knock and we got like six replies. Boom, 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 boom.
Wow.
And that was it though. Nothing else the rest of the night.
Yeah, and I got 5 knocks the very first time, but lots of knocks. It would be inconsistent with my experience. They knock a few times and then they shut up, or they vocalize a few times and then they shut up. Okay, moving on. I think there's just a couple more clips here.
And try not to be howls.
Oh yeah, that was the point I wanted to make. Thank you. So while I do encourage the whoop knock combination, I discourage the long howl. We all think that's the way to do it. We see Bobo doing it on, Finding Bigfoot. Let me ask you, by show of hands, how many times have you done that long howl and gotten a good solid response from it?
Yep.
1.
Up in my office.
Okay, 1. Okay. Out of all of the experience here, 1 has had that. Please don't do that. It's been our experience, not just mine, Charles and others too. That howl shuts down your activity. Because when you hear those howls here, as we've gone through this show, notice that quite often it has a very distinct meaning. It seems to be a big, powerful character, okay? None of us are that big and that powerful. We walk into this area, we try to mimic them. And in these instances where it seems to be an authentic vocalizer, they seem to be reaching out to their partners who recognize their voice, who know them, and possibly they're the dominant one in the area. We walk in and we're trying to fake it. We're a poser trying to show dominance, and we don't even execute correctly.
Just a whistle behind us right now. A bird?
It did sound very birdy.
Okay.
Is it up and down though? I got it.
That's cool. So, long story short, let me discourage the use of the long howl. I think you will wind up hurting yourself in your attempts to get any kind of a response. Stick with the whoop and the knock, or just knocks. Charles has had great luck with triple knocks. I try to use that more. Sasquatch are cryptic. The ones that vocalize loud and long are probably, my conjecture, the boss. Yes. And they know who the boss is in the area. Do not walk in there and act like you're the boss. You're going to confuse them, or they're going to know. We got a poser, probably a BFRO member in here trying to, get something out of us.
KBRO.
Yeah, KBRO is back. and you'll just shut down your activity. So, I discourage the use.
Can I add to that, too? A lot of times I go out, people want to do screams and other crazy howls and stuff. I strongly discourage that as well, because we don't get any activity back from that.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds really cool to these crazy loud vocals, but the best thing that works are the knocks and whoops together or just separate.
Yep.
How about clacking? Rock clacking?
Yes.
Rock clacks, yeah, subtle. So,
Devin, let me clarify though. So, like when you played the Kentucky vocalization in Tennessee, you got a response.
Mm-hmm.
Is it like a call blast of an actual, we'll say, purported Sasquatch? Okay, because it's big and powerful, or would you still discourage that?
Well, no, that's actually the closest we've come to actually getting any kind of a response to like a loud, powerful vocalization, a long howl, is by using an authentic, or what we believe to be an authentic recording. We do have good luck with that, but yeah, who knows? But what happens when we do that? We'll get knocks or whoops back from the forest. But when we try it ourselves, I've only seen one instance where it worked, and that's where on BFRO on Finding Bigfoot, Bobo made a moan howl. I think they were in Utah, and they got a response from the far side of the canyon. But in all of the episodes, that's the only time it worked. And in all of the years of research I've done with other people, other than this one, it just doesn't work. So you're probably doing more harm when you use that one. Remember, they're cryptic. When they vocalize, they get it done and they shut up. And most of what we hear out here in the forest is very low key. So we should communicate in low key manner, just as they do.
Amen.
Okay. Promise we're almost done. I got a total of 19 files. So let's see what these last 3 are. Whoop response. Clips. Oh, this is. I don't remember who this was. Oh, yeah, okay. You hear that really deep whoop? Mm-hmm. The original recording, you couldn't hear the whoop. It wasn't until we filtered the higher pitched noise out that the very deep whoop is audible in that. And play it one more time.
Is the first one a person?
Yeah, the first one's a person. That's a person. And then listen, you hear a deep whoop. Right there. Yeah, really deep whoop. And whoops are not always very high pitched. They're not always these easily heard things. We get some really super deep whoops. And I think this next clip is one from 2010, Tennessee. Okay, double whoop knock. So in this one, I was at this place called Camp Scream in Tennessee in 2010, where Charles and I met. And I had gone up the mountain with this other fella. I've got a terrible whoop. It sounds really ragged and rough. This guy had a beautiful whoop. And I told him, let's do this, a whoop and a knock. And he would do a whoop, I would do a knock. And we got no answer. He did a whoop, I did a knock. And we got no answer. I said, okay, last time, you do a double whoop, I'll do a knock. Or either you do a whoop and I'll do a double knock, something like that. And we got a really deep whoop in response. Software didn't work right, but here's his double whoop. Yeah, that's super deep whoop.
It sounded very, very close to the last one.
Sorry?
It sounded very close to the last
Yeah.
low
The low deep one, yep. Those are two different locations. But those super deep whoops, we get those quite often. And I don't know if it's a larger bodied vocalizer, just has a deeper voice and makes that. But pay attention at the low end of the spectrum, you'll get some very deep whoops.
Could you tell the distance?
In that case, I can recall that guy was pretty close to us. We were perched high on the mountainside at the edge of a gravel road, looking down into a deep ravine where we had done that. And it was probably, 100 plus yards down the hillside below us. We could just audibly detect it with our ears. That's filtered, and so it sounds even better. But we knew, okay, he's down there, or it's down there, but there's no way we could have ever gotten there. It was a super steep North Carolina mountain or Tennessee mountain.
From as soft as it is, I would think it would have to be closer than farther away. Because you're not going to get that softness from a distance.
Exactly, yeah. Now the deep pitch does help it carry.
Sure.
But
I wonder how much of it is even out of your hearing range or even the recording range in terms of the low end of the frequency.
Well, that was high enough that it was pretty audible. I mean, we even heard some of it with our ear. I wouldn't say it was deep enough to be in the infrasound. still well above that. Let's see. What's the last thing? Lake whoops. Okay, here we go. This came from right here in the park. This is why we hiked to that god awful Mistake Lake last night. Charles, you want to give them the background?
Sure. And I'm hoping that you pulled out my voice.
No, it's all in there, man. This is the original audio. It's all in there.
Okay. So we hiked down all the way down to this lake. It's a hell of a hike. It is coming back out is horrendous, but going down is not terrible.
Kicked our ass.
But we walked down to the lake, and we decided we were going to walk clockwise or around this lake, and we walked about a quarter of the way around to the left. And we stopped. There was actually a camper, someone camping down there in a tent, and we went past them, and we kept going, and we stopped about a quarter of the way around this lake, and we said, let's do a whoop and a wood knock. So we did, and
yeah, I was gonna say that's a camper.
Yeah, let's do a whoop and a wood knock, and we did. We stopped and we did it, and then we got a response from across completely on the other side of this small lake. But when I heard it, we're jokesters. We joke a lot, and I heard something. I said, "Greg, did you fart?" Because Greg was with us, and it was actually a whoop from the other side of the lake, and it actually, I guess, is probably 15 seconds later, it was moving clockwise around the lake just like we were, but it was coming closer towards us. And about, 10, 15 seconds after the first one, it whooped the second time.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe another 10 seconds later, it whooped the third time, and it was coming closer to us. And at that point, it shut up. We assumed that it got close enough that it realized that we weren't really another Squatch, and we had originally had it fooled. But this was the audio from that experience.
Yeah. And it's a good demonstration of, one, we did manage to fool one, and it came to investigate us. But two, it's a good example of why you really need to be quiet after you do this. Because unfortunately, while a couple of these are audible, we stepped on a couple of them because we're shuffling around and all that crap. But yeah, it was a fun clip. This is one worth getting into Audacity so they can see it.
Okay.
Where is your Audacity here?
Hit all apps.
All apps, okay.
And if it should be, this is my new computer, so it may not.
It may not be on here.
It may not be on here.
Audacity.
I just got this one about a month or so ago.
Nope.
It's not on
We
there
got
yet.
no Audacity here. Oh, it's a shame. Okay, well, we'll just listen. Because the spectrogram really shows the whoops and helps you see them and hear them better. But we don't have the spectrogram. You'll hear the first whoop. Right there. That was a whoop. I heard a whoop. Did you fart? There's a second one. Wait, just listen. That was the last whoop we got. Behind us. Yeah, there were 4 whoops in there. The third one's really stepped on badly, and that was the last one, just kind of woo. And then after that, we're standing there in pitch black, and I'm out in front. The guys are behind me. I'm a little closer to the lake, and as we're looking at the lake, I can sense something moving through the darkness, and it's coming in from around the edge of the lake, and it's moving fast, and it's really quiet, and all I can hear is the occasional like a twig or a branch of a leaf on a branch or something being impacted by something big moving through. And I can hear impacts up here at about 8 to 10 feet and down here all the way down to the ground level. And it's just moving through, but it's so stealthy and so fast. And it just comes and angles across the trail ahead of us and off into the woods. And it was gone. And it was almost like, you know, if that was a Sasquatch, it was super stealthy and super fast. And it just made a pass about 50 feet out in front of me on the trail. And we're in pitch black. And it spotted us, and it didn't even slow down. It just, man, it was gone. And no eye glow or anything like that. But after that, you know, the activity was dead. And we just left a little while later. So that's all I have. Are there any questions?
I have a question.
Yep.
I don't know if it's been debunked or not, but that example vocalization with the term labeled samurai chatter.
Yeah.
Is that some form of English or Native American dialect or possibly foreign language that was delivered so rapidly it's unintelligible?
Yeah.
What's your view on
No idea what it is. The supposition that it could be language has some strong credibility behind it, especially the analysis that Scott Nelson did, and I studied his analysis. He went through and he used the standard techniques that we are trained with in Cryptologic school. And he broke it down, and he spent months transcribing that because you're right, it's very fast. It can be tough to discern in that recording.
Have you ever heard it slow down? Or?
Oh yeah. As he was going through that after he finished his analysis, and he spent almost 2 years, I believe, working on that. One, he developed basically an alphabet for the sounds that were in there, and he transcribed what he was hearing, and he sent that to me for peer review and said, "Okay, Devin, I need you to go through this," and it's something we all do as linguists. And I went through, and with few exceptions, I had to concur with the way he had transcribed it. What he was hearing is what I was hearing. There are a few things I would have transcribed this vowel differently, you know, that consonant differently, or I thought maybe you're hear a consonant that I don't hear, but that's kind of normal. But 95% of what he had, I could concur with. Now, the structure that's there definitely suggests this is a language. Is it a known language? No, it's nothing I recognized. Nothing he recognized. We call it samurai chatter. It's definitely not Japanese, but it does appear to be a language. There are symbols in there that potentially communicate information. Okay.
You can't tell the base root, like what language it comes from?
No, we can't take it that far. You need a lot more examples of it. We did. Since then, we have collected more sample audio or audio samples. None as extensive as that, but we do have other instances of people capturing things, and I've even managed to capture a little bit of audio that sounds like speech, short snippets of speech that are being used. The challenge with collecting that sort of audio is getting a microphone close enough to hear a conversation, because when they're speaking like that, they're doing it like this. They're probably not even speaking as loudly as I did for this crowd, but they're speaking to each other. So their voice is very low, and we're never close enough to hear that. The only thing we can really hear is these loud projecting vocals that they use to communicate through the forest. And that's why I focus on that in my studies. Scott did a great job with his analysis. We do have a few more great instances. What I can tell you about is there's a fella sent me some audio from very close to the Canadian border, just south of British Columbia. And his house is there, and he said he has activity around his house. One night he decided to go out and sleep in his shed. I don't know why the hell he did this. And he kept a recorder with him inside the shed, had the door of the shed cracked a little bit. And while he was deep asleep, you can hear him sawing logs. Voices right outside the door, like two female voices speaking in what sounds sort of like a Native American language. But, you know, it's like 2 a.m. in his backyard outside of his shed. And it was one of the better examples of potential language that we've captured. And there are snippets of language out there. Just we don't have any thing. We don't have enough to compile
So
a
that's
good
been
data
captured
lake.
more than one place. It's a,
Oh yeah. We've got some from Tennessee.
okay.
You know, like potentially Sasquatch yelling at each other in the brush, and one fellow managed to record it, but it only goes on for 10 seconds. So we've got it on the West Coast, we've got it on the East Coast, and yeah, it's all across North America.
I believe Larry Sidwell has heard it with his own ears too. So.
Larry,
Yeah,
have you heard something like language?
kind of in our first expedition there in 2012. We had I had the tent push and, along the Blackwater River. It was a chatter. It was unintelligible. Just, I mean, it was like a smaller one. It was more higher pitched than I would have expected because I had a deep whoop right before that when they crossed the river, and it was like you know, it just
Cool.
made no sense. It was just chatter. It was just They didn't do it very long. It was very, like you said, it's soft, very soft
and brief.
Then they nosed around camp for a few minutes as well.
Yep. That's typical. Yeah, it's understated, brief. Get off the stage and move on.
You were discussing mimics earlier too. I've spent almost a month's total time out with Kirk Brandenburg and his crew. An expedition in 2019 that was a week long, and then two 11-day expeditions, 2021 and this year. You hear all these stories and the sounds and all that stuff, and one of the good mimic ones is, and they talk about it often, is Kirk was going to bed to his tent, which is along the tree line like we do here.
Yeah.
And somebody says goodnight, he says goodnight, and out in the foliage, goodnight.
Yeah.
He turned around
That's
and walked
beautiful.
back over where everybody else is at.
That's great. That is classic.
Awesome. And then I don't know if you've heard they captured their the opera singer.
No, I haven't heard that one.
It's on YouTube.
Okay.
But it's neat. You're talking about the singing, and it is amazing.
Yeah. There's another good mimicry that I've heard. David Ellison out in Washington sent me this clip. Years ago when he was doing his research, he had a German Shepherd named Kaya. And he took Kaya into the forest with him one time, and he had his audio recorder going. Kaya got a little far away from him, and he says to her, "Come here, Kaya." And 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds later, you hear a voice from the forest. His audio captures it, repeating, "Come here, Kaya." The come here part was not as clear, but the Kaya is extremely clear. It's like, "Hey, Kaya," and he got that recorded, sent it to me years ago. That was probably one of the first instances of mimicry I'd ever heard. So.
Devin, has there been any consideration into the idea or possibility of a wood knot being confused with a hooked clap?
Yeah, good. It's a lot of conjecture at this point. What I can confidently say is they obviously use percussion as part of their communication. Now, how they're making that percussion, there seems to be a variety of means. Definitely, we hear clear woody notes at times, so we believe wood knocks are a part of it. We hear fleshy sounding hand claps. In fact, some of my clips sort of sounded like hand claps. So we believe hand claps, an easy percussion to do. David Ellison has sent me things that sound like chest rapping, almost like a gorilla. We hear clear things that sound like mouth pops. So it's easy to believe that they're actually using a combination of all of these based upon what they have available or the situation at the time. But definitely percussion is part of the way they communicate. And so they probably use all of those together.
We've been out in the woods before when there's been a heavy rain or it's currently raining and all the trees and bark and wood is
wet.
soaked. But we've heard that classic knock. And so I don't know how it happened, but it didn't seem like it was wood because everything was soaked.
Yeah. I agree. And who knows, maybe they just have a way of mimicking a sound like that or making a sound like that. Yeah.
Well, speaking of hand claps, give it up for Devin.
Thank you, Charles. I appreciate it.